With the New York Jets eliminated from playoff contention for the 12th straight year, Jets fans need a scapegoat. And they seem to have focused on one person in particular. But that may not be the wisest idea. Let's talk about it. Well, welcome back to New York Sports WickerMedia. I'm Wa2K99. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to watch these videos. If you're new here, thank you very much. Please subscribe. Whether you're new or returning, please like. I appreciate it very much. Let's talk about the Jets right now. So it's 24 hours now since the Jets season came crashing down in flames in Lumen Field in Seattle, Washington. And since then, it's been pretty much the usual rain of posts on social media and on radio. Fire this guy, cut this guy, we got to draft this guy, man, this guy sucks. All this type of stuff. It's been the same thing, just relentlessly for the last 24 hours, and I imagine it's not going to stop soon. But the main target that we have seen has been offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur. He has been suffering the wrath of Jets fans as of late. And I really find that interesting, that LaFleur is the one that people are pointing the finger at. Let's look at a few stats about this Jets team, and then I want to talk about a couple of other things in regards to the whole offensive coordinator thing, and even as far as the Jets go. So let's look at a few different things. When we look at yards per game, we really look at a lot of these stats, we start to see a pattern. As far as yards go, through their first 10 games, the Jets were averaging 331 yards per game. Okay, they've had a few clunkers. They had 103 against New England. I mean, that were just ridiculous. The last 4 games, it's been only 288 yards per game, near the absolute bottom of the league. I think it's actually third worst amongst all teams. All right, so they went from okay to terrible. If we go to points per game, because yards could be a bit of a misnomer, that's fine. Well, the Jets were averaging through those first 9 games 22.7 points per game, or the first 8 games, excuse me. Their last 9 games, they're averaging only 13.3 points per game, and then less than 9 points per game in their last 3. They've scored 26 points in their last 3 games, under 9 per game, completely unacceptable. Here's another points number that is really amazing to me. In the Jets' first 6 games this season, they scored over 20 points 4 times. Now, some teams will scoff their nose at scoring 20 points, but if you're getting over 20, you're probably scoring on a pretty consistent level. That's a pretty good offensive output, and that's something that you could work with. So the Jets did that 4 times in 6 games. In the 10 games since, you know how many times the Jets have scored over 20 points? 2 times. And it was back-to-back against Chicago and Minnesota, 2 defenses that stink. Unless Minnesota's in the red zone, apparently. And speaking of the red zone, that's the next stat that I want to talk to you about. And this has become the latest bullet for the Mike LaFleur haters. This has become probably their #1 bullet that they love to use. They're talking about the red zone and how ineffective the Jets are in the red zone, and that's got to be on the offensive coordinator. Well, if we look after the Denver game, the first 7 games when Breece Hall and Elijah Vera Tucker were on this team, the Jets were 9th in the NFL in red zone touchdown percentage. They were scoring touchdowns 60% of the time they got into the red zone. Even after the next game against New England, they were still at 60%. They're at 11th in the NFL. You know where they are now overall for the whole season? They have scored touchdowns just 45.45% of the time in the red zone. And which is amazing because almost halfway through the season, they were at 60%. In the last 3 weeks, they're down to just 20% touchdown conversion. So the point is, this was an offense that was working earlier on in the season. It was working pretty well. But then they lost Breece Hall. They lost Elijah Vera Tucker. Dwayne Brown had 1 shoulder that was working. George Fant had 1 knee that was working, and they had to play him because AVT went out. Max Mitchell went out. There wasn't the depth there. And that's when these defenses started to figure out, hey, you know what? We could stack the box against the Jets, completely take away their running game, which is what they want to do, which is what Mike LaFleur would do if he could. but they don't have the quarterback who's going to be able to take advantage of it, of make those necessary throws, like Jimmy Garoppolo was able to do, for instance. Just throwing a name out there, like Trey Lance probably could have done. And to me, when they lost those two players, Hall and Vera Tucker, the Jets lost their offensive identity. They were never able to get it back. And if you want to blame LaFleur for that, you know what? That's fine. You're welcome to do that. But I'll go back to it again. These players, you had quarterbacks who could not throw an accurate pass. And if they could throw an accurate pass, they had no mobility whatsoever. Okay, you could either have mobility, you could have moderate accuracy, but God forbid that a Jets quarterback would have both of those qualities, right? You have an offensive line that can't block, that got worse and worse and worse as the season went on. You know, when we did the game preview for Seattle, when we did that video, I gave you stats about Herbig, about Tomlinson, and McGovern, and how bad they've been the last 2 to 4 weeks in particular. And there was no quarterback that was ever going to overcome that. Then you have the receivers dropping passes just relentlessly, maybe because they don't know where the ball's going to go and they're not confident that they're going to make the catch either. I mean, how many drops did we see against Seattle? At least 5 or 6 that I can remember off the top of my head. You know, and here's the thing. I really don't want to have to feel like they got to rebuild this offense all over again. We already know that the Jets are going to go get a veteran quarterback. That is absolutely needed. But then you throw in an offensive line with Mekhi Becton coming back, God willing. You know, you have to at least factor him in as an option, maybe not as a starter, but as an option. Throw in AVT. Throw in Max Mitchell, who's a year older. You know, you could bring back Herbig if you wanted to do that. I think they're going to make a change at center, to be honest. But then you still have Garrett Wilson. You have Elijah Moore. Corey Davis might be gone, so be it. You know, and then you have a pretty good 1-2 punch between Ty Conklin and CJ Uzomah. And LaFleur started to figure out finally to use CJ Uzomah, to use him in the red zone. And it actually started to work a little bit later on in the season. Okay, Conklin had a pretty good game this past week as well. The tight ends were starting to get it going. But then you add in the running game. Breece Hall, Bam Knight. Let's see. Ty Johnson didn't look too bad this season. We'll see if he's back. Michael Carter had a disappointing year in my mind. I love Michael Carter. His season was disappointing, but if he's the third running back, you know what? Sign me up for that. That's by far and away probably the best third running back that you'll find anywhere in the NFL. And I just want to say this in general about the offensive coordinator. Why does the offensive coordinator get all the blame but no credit? It's amazing. When an offense is working, the players get the credit. Maybe the head coach gets the credit. But when the offense is struggling, there's two people who get blamed, the quarterback and the offensive coordinator. You know, I am anything but a football coach. I am far from a football coach. But I'll tell you what, the last job I'd want is to be a coordinator, offensive or defensive coordinator. I mean, think about Jeff Ulbrich. When this defense was struggling and they couldn't get a pass rush quite so effectively the first couple of weeks, there were a lot of Jets fans and a lot of content creators who were calling for Jeff Ulbrich to get fired mid-season. I feel like nobody has talked about Jeff Ulbrich since about mid to late October. Why? Because the defense is playing well and the players get the credit, not the coach. It's just food for thought, okay? If they fire Mike LaFleur, here's bottom line. If they let LaFleur go, will I be angry about it? I'm not going to be angry about it. I'll get it to an extent. I'll be willing to take a chance on another offensive coordinator. You know, if it's like a Frank Reich, if it's a veteran who has a good amount of experience, with developing a passing offense, fine, I can live with it. But for the Jet fans who think that the first thing they have to do is fire Mike LaFleur at the end of the season, my question is, what is this accomplishing? The Jets were running a competent NFL offense that looked like it could have been getting better and better as the season was going on. It was sabotaged by offensive line injuries, an injury to their best weapon, and a complete regression in quarterback play. There was and even in the red zone, people said, why does Mike LaFleur get so cute in the red zone? Because he didn't trust this pathetic offensive line to block effectively. So he would get a little bit crazy at times for that very reason. I don't think LaFleur is running the offense that he would be running if he had his way about it. Okay? Oh, and I want to say one other thing about the history of the New York Jets and their offensive coordinators. I'm tired of this revolving door. Let me give you a couple of numbers on this one. This blew my mind when I read it. Since 1981, that was the first year that the offensive coordinator was an official title, the Jets have had 16 offensive coordinators. 16 in 41 years. That's a new offensive coordinator every 2.5 years. 2.5 years. It gets even better. All right, Brian Schottenheimer had 6 years. I mean, that's like, Chuck Noll or Tom Landry, but in terms of Jet years. He had 6 years here. He left after 2011. Okay, since that time, in those 11 years that would be now, the Jets have had 7 offensive coordinators. That's a new one every 1.5 years, and not one of them have made it to year 3. You want to give me the names? It's like the Jets OC graveyard, we'll call it, okay? Tony Sperano, rest in peace. Marty Morningweg, Chan Gailey, John Morton, Jeremy Bates, Dowell Loggins. Pardon me if I don't want to see this offensive coordinator go right away, and then we go on to the next one, especially when this is a first-time OC. I want to see what he can do with a real quarterback, and you know what? If it doesn't work after this year, be my guest to let him go. But in my opinion, I would give this coaching staff the 3rd year. You want to change a few position coaches, wide receiver coach, feel free to do that. Okay, I got no issue with that. But the number one reason for this offense, declining the way that it did, to me, it is not the offensive coordinator. To me, there are several other factors that you have to put it on first before you talk about Mike LaFleur. Well, hey, you might agree with me. You might think I'm nuts, and I am nuts because I'm a Jets fan. But, hey, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd like to get your opinion. Let's, have a conversation back and forth. Do you think Mike LaFleur should keep his job? Why? Do you think he should be fired? Tell me why. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I appreciate it. I'll see you back here with more content from you know where. The Wicker Chair.